Hello, my name is Camilla Elliott. I teach in the Department of English Literature and Creative Writing at Lancaster University, and I've made a short video for you introducing you to the language of William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Now, nothing is more celebrated about Shakespeare than his language, and sometimes nothing is more difficult than Shakespeare and his language for students, but not just students, for me too, because the language has changed a lot since 400 years and more ago. So now the way this video works is that I'll talk for a little while, then I'll ask you to pause the video and think about some questions that I will give you. You can think about them, you can write about them, you can talk about them if you're with other people. And then when you're ready, you go on, you continue watching the video, and we'll go back and forth in that way until the end. More than any other writer in English, William Shakespeare has been celebrated for his language. However, more than 400 years after this play was written, there have been so many changes to the English language that for some, his plays read almost like a foreign language. I took my 13-year-old son, who loved action movies and still does, to see Baz Luhrmann's film adaptation of Romeo and Juliet, thinking maybe this will get him interested in the language. But when I asked him what he thought of the film, he just said 4 words to me: foreign film, needed subtitles. And yet, there are a lot of words and phrases that Shakespeare used for the first time that we still use today, which are very straightforward and with which we are very familiar. Here are just some of them. Knock, knock, who's there? Set your teeth on edge. She's got a heart of gold. I say fight fire with fire. I haven't slept a wink. What's done is done. Well, that's seen better days. Come what may. Oh, I sent him packing. That makes your hair stand on end. Oh, fair play. Foul play. For goodness sake. Oh, that's a wild goose chase. Vanish into thin air. And these are just a handful of many, many phrases. And yet, even so, there are many more words that we have to look up in the dictionary today because they are no longer in use. And there are a number of phrases that would have been commonly understood at the time that we don't understand today without looking them up. But beyond this difficulty with how much language has changed over 400 years, the language in Romeo and Juliet is very stylized, very elaborate. You can see this in the title on the left when it was published in 1599. Today, we call the play Romeo and Juliet. Here, it is the most excellent and lamentable tragedy of Romeo and Juliet. The elaborate language of the play is not the language that most people spoke at this time. People going to the play would have found it to be elaborate too, and would want to be entertained by how elaborate it was. So let's have a look at this a little bit more. Being skilled with words was a vital part of a man's accomplishments if that man wanted to make his way in the world. This is a portrait of Sir Philip Sidney, who was what you might call a Renaissance man, quite literally so. He was skilled in combat as a soldier. He tragically died of battle wounds at the age of 31. He was an accomplished scholar. He was a statesman and a diplomat. He composed music. He was a skilled dancer. And he was also a poet. Now, the court of Queen Elizabeth was brimming with accomplished people who not only entertained the Queen, but she herself was accomplished. She loved literature, drama, and music and dance, and had great intellectual curiosity. She played several instruments, she spoke 6 languages fluently, and she wrote poetry herself. And this wasn't just about entertainment, but it was part of having power and influence at court and finding favor from the queen and exchanging ideas and making a mark in that way. Now I'm going to hand over to you to think and to write and to discuss, if you're with someone else, these questions. What would you say are the essential qualities for being a celebrity today? What things do you have to be good at? Do you need to be good at more than one thing? And is it even possible to be good at so many things today, or indeed at any time? Do you even have to be good at anything to find fame and fortune today? Let's think of some examples of all of these. And then finally, how important is being good with words today to being famous or to being wealthy? So I'm going to ask you to pause the video here and spend some time on these questions. And then when you're ready, you can move on again. One of the things that was very strong in the Elizabethan era was the belief in the power of words. And this was in part because that was the main form in which you could circulate easily and cheaply any kind of communication or representation among different kinds of people. There's a very strong sense that power over words and power with words is crucial to gaining power in society. Control over words is control over people. It is control to make them do what you want, to win them over to your point of view, perhaps to make them fall in love with you, to put them down, tell them off, make them look foolish, make them laugh or cry or move other emotions. And because of this, training in rhetoric or the use of words to persuade people and have power over people was a major part of what students learned at school. If you were a student in the Elizabethan age, you would have been given an arsenal of rhetorical devices to add power to your words, not just in the way that you arranged them or spoke them, but through bringing other art forms to bear on language. So there were all kinds of rhetorical devices that created sound effects, things like assonance, alliteration, rhyme, rhythm. There were other kinds of devices that allowed you to paint pictures with words so that you could actually make your listener or your reader create the illustrations for what you're saying in their head. You could capture them that way. Then very careful arrangements of word order can make very striking effects in terms of persuading people, whether you repeat something or you turn it around or you create incongruous or striking contrasts. All of these things were used and learned by people in order to have power over others. There was not the sense that words just flow spontaneously from your mind or your soul. There was a constant and careful strategy using words. Now it's time for you to think again and to write or discuss with others. Where do you see the power of words today? What kinds of words have power over you or other people? Then I would like you to think about what's changed in what makes words powerful today from what we've just been looking at in Shakespeare's time. You might think about things like whether we now still have very long-winded, elaborate, sophisticated, stylized kinds of writing, and if they have power. And if not, why is that? Think about what might have changed to make that happen. So now pause the video, write down your thoughts on this or discuss them, and when you're ready, you can continue on. I'm taking you back to the slide I showed you earlier on. These are some of the many dozens of phrases that Shakespeare used for the first time that we still use today. You'll notice that not one of them is long or elaborate or highly stylized. And that might tell you something about how language has changed and what the things are in Shakespeare that we still find useful today, and what kinds of things in Shakespeare we don't use anymore in our daily lives. But at Shakespeare's time, literature, the literary fashion was to be really clever with words and to flaunt it again and again, how clever you were with words. To use a lavish display of rhetorical devices, to write complex lines where words might mean 6 things instead of 1 thing, and to play with structure to make the meaning as dense and rich as you possibly can. Lots of people have said you can't just go watch a Shakespeare play and get everything from the words. You have to sit down with it and slow down on the page here. People wanted to show that they were sophisticated and polished and to be admired. The sophistication and the polish, like fine clothing and beautifully cut jewelry, or tremendous skill with a sword or with a musical instrument. But it was also about competition. Competition with the past and competition with writers in the present. The Renaissance writers looked back to the Greeks and the Romans that they studied as children and that their society worshipped, and they wanted to do better. They wanted to outdo them. They also wanted to outdo rival writers in their own day because they were rivals for the fame, the fortune, and the sponsorship that writers like Shakespeare, who didn't have an independent income from a wealthy family, but actually had to earn his money. So it wasn't just about finding the rich to sponsor you, but it was also about getting public popularity and paying audiences. Now, printing wasn't so well developed at this time that you could easily make a good living by publishing your work. That was coming later. So let's think a bit about Shakespeare. We've talked about Philip Sidney. Shakespeare was about 30 when he wrote Romeo and Juliet, and he'd been writing for at least 6 years before that. So he is a young writer, but it's time now. It's time for him to make his mark. And he does this, as a lot of people do, with your first performance or your first whatever you're trying to put out there, by cramming in everything you think and everything you know and all the skills you've developed. Let me show you everything I can do. Over the top to outdo his rivals as well and to find an audience. It's like writing on steroids in a way. And it's interesting to see that some of his later plays start to tone things down a bit as he becomes more mature and realizes that it may not be the best way to impress an audience to just be doing dazzling displays with words. Okay, back to you again. Here I would like you to think about the ways in which you use words, but also maybe other kinds of media to make your mark. And when you're posting something, say on social media, or performing something for family and friends at home, what's important? What do you pay attention to? What are the essential ingredients? Let's say you're doing a vlog or a blog, or you're making a post, or you're uploading a photograph, or you're you're writing a text message to somebody that you're trying to impress, or speaking to somebody live in a way that you're trying to impress them, you're trying to make a mark. What kind of words would you use? What kind of other media would you use? And if you would say, well, words aren't so important, it's more about the selfie, or it's more about the Instagram photo or the TikTok video. Why is it, do you think, that words don't matter so much now, perhaps, as they did in Shakespeare's day, when obviously people didn't have any of the modern media, but most people couldn't afford to buy paintings or prints or published text. So words were really, really central. But I would like you also to think about, what would you do if you could only use words? Only words. How would you write to try and impress people? So take some time now. I mean, you could take an hour or half an hour to think about this and to do some writing. Or you could take a few minutes. Or you could wait and get together with a friend later on and talk about these things. So we're going to go back now to think about the importance of language in Elizabethan theatre. Although there were sets, there were costumes, there were bodies moving, there were facial expressions, there were gesture, there was music, simple forms of lighting, theatre was heavily about verbal display. The word audience comes from the word to hear. It's much more about the auditory senses than any other sense. And the sets were simple, and yes, the costumes were lavish, but there wasn't a lot of spectacle and special effects and lavish visual activity going on the stage. And if you look at this play, you'll see that characters had to stand still or strut when they were speaking, that the burden of speaking, filling up so much time, and very few stage directions or actions, doesn't mean they didn't move, but the focus was very heavily on the language. What I'd like you to do here is have a look at this picture. This is the scene from Hamlet where he has some traveling players put on a play telling the story of how he thinks his uncle the king had murdered his father who had been king, and he's trying to see if he looks guilty. So you can see Hamlet down there on the floor looking at the king, who does indeed look guilty. But the thing I want you to focus on here is less what's going on in the plot and more what's happening with the audience. You'll see that some of them are looking at the stage and the actors, but that a lot of them aren't. Some of them just seem to be listening. So have a few moments. You can look a bit more. You can think about the way they're seated, which way they're facing, and what that says about listening. It may also say something about the painting and what the painter's trying to get in there as well. But this is just an illustration of the importance of hearing. And you'll see the subtitle there, Hamlet doesn't say, we're going to go see a play, we're going to hear a play. So let's think a bit more about verbal entertainment, okay? The words needed to be entertaining. They weren't there just to get a message across or to tell what's happening. Playwrights worked really hard to make their audiences laugh, and they had a variety of humorous forms to suit different types of class and tastes in humor. Shakespeare's well known for his bawdy humor, but also for his clever wit. The character Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet is skilled in both, so you can have a look at some of his speeches. He also had buffoons. You don't realize they are, but that they're the butt of a joke. And sometimes even his villains are diabolically funny. Shakespeare also made audiences cry. Again, there wasn't just one kind of grief that he wrote, but many kinds, ranging from laughter mixed with tears, to soft sentiment, to raging sorrow, deepest grief, and utter despair. Shakespeare also used words to thrill his audiences, to horrify them with the rage of violence, crime, and betrayal, but also with sounds and rhythms and cadences. It was almost like a kind of different style of music, the way that he used different words to convey different emotional states. So now, back to you. What words do you or your friends use to make people laugh, or what words do you see in media today that make you laugh? What words do you use or other people use to make people cry? And what words do you use to horrify people? Or again, would you say words are not so important? Is it more about pictures? Or would words be more important for one of these than the others? So again, pause the video, take the time you need to think about this, and then press play again. There are other videos in this playlist that talk about the importance of language to things like swordplay, courtship, and character. Here are some further resources if you want to know more about some of the issues we've been discussing in this video. And here are the credits for the pictures that are in this video. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy Romeo and Juliet.